Tragedy has struck the Philippines as that island nation is struggling after a major typhoon. Nearly 250 people are dead from flooding alone.
And that government says it needs help before things get worse. Here's reporter John Jessup.
The devastation can be seen everywhere you turn. Bloated rivers, dirty, muddy streets, and about 500,000 flooded homes. It's the result of a tropical storm that dumped more than a month's worth of rain in just 12 hours over the weekend and led to the worst flooding the country has seen in 42 years.
We were so scared of the flood. All we can do was really pray.
The storm has killed more than 240 people, but the death toll is expected to climb. Rescuers are still pulling bodies out of the rubble and crested waters, and many are still missing. This man says he lost track of his wife when their roof collapsed. They had climbed on top to escape the rising floodwaters. American missionaries Jerome and Heather Sack moved to the Philippines earlier this year with their 2 children. Jerome chronicled their ordeal on the social networking website Facebook with photos and video, ominously reporting what they saw. Typhoon in the Philippines, water rising to our door fast, moving things upstairs.
Right here is our front steps, and you'll see that it's covering a couple of steps, and then once you get out to the street, it goes down to the street, so it's getting closer and closer.
The Sacks are okay, but the suffering in the Philippines is far from over. The flooding forced nearly 2 million people from their homes. CBN's Operation Blessing dispatched doctors going house to house in devastated neighborhoods. They helped this woman and her sick baby. They were trapped on the roof for hours.
My baby has fever because he got soaked in the rain when we climbed to the roof to save ourselves from the rising water.
And as if things couldn't get any worse, more bad news may be on the horizon. Forecasters are tracking 2 separate storms in the Pacific, one that could hit the Philippines later this week and another early next. John Jessup, CBN News.
Breaks your heart. Those people are right at the edge of poverty. They say that's the Philippine answer to Katrina. We had a horrible storm in the New Orleans area. Operation Blessing mobilized in New Orleans, and we're doing the same thing in the Philippines. Here's what's happening. Our teams are mobilizing to provide food, clean water, and emergency medical care. Operation Blessing disaster relief teams are getting food and clean water distributions, deploying medical teams in hardest hit areas. And already teams are partnering with local churches to help fund more than 4,000 or 5,000 affected residents. We'll be doing much more, but it's a huge tragedy, and the aid that has been offered isn't coming in fast enough. They need every bit of help we can give them. So pray for the Philippines, dear, wonderful people, and it breaks your heart to see them suffering in this way. Lee Webb has the rest of our top stories from the CBN Newsroom. Lee.
Pat, public support for the Democrats' health care plan has hit a new low in the polls. A new Rasmussen survey shows only 41% of voters nationwide support the plan and 56% are opposed. The poll also finds that senior citizens are much less supportive of the plan than younger voters. Meanwhile, pro-life legislators from both parties want to make sure that a federal plan would not include funding for abortion. And liberal Democrats in the Senate are facing off against their more moderate colleagues over whether the government should offer the so-called public option. That's a government-run insurance plan for the middle class that would compete with private companies. Pat?
Well, Lee, I just think they ought to scrap that thing and start all over again. It is flawed. The American people don't want it, and it's time that Congress that has a 10 ears start listening to what the people are saying. The people don't like it. They don't like it, and Obama thinks it's a feather in his cap to enhance his prestige. But that we don't want to saddle America with some horrible health care system just in order to make the president feel good. The time has come to say, let's scrap what's there, go back to the drawing board, and carefully consider the things that are necessary and leave out all the stuff that's not necessary. Lee?
Pastors in about 80 churches across the U.S. preached partisan political sermons this past Sunday. They're part of something called the Pulpit Initiative, sponsored by the Alliance Defense Fund. The program is designed to challenge the IRS to revoke the church's tax-exempt status. The ADF says the effort hopes to restore, quote, a pastor's right to speak freely from his pulpit without fearing censorship or punishment by the government. But the organization says the program is not about encouraging pastors to endorse candidates, only to speak out on cultural issues from a biblical perspective. The president of the World Bank is warning that the dollar may not always be the main currency for international trade. Robert Zoellick says the dollar will remain a major currency, but he says the euro and China's currency could become more popular in the international markets. He warns the dollar's outlook will depend heavily on U.S. decisions on key issues like reducing the debt and cutting the huge federal deficit. Pat?
Well, when you are profligate, you bear the consequences. You remember the story of the son who went away and wasted his substance on riotous living. We are wasting our substance. Congress is out of control. It's been out of control for years. Administrations have been out of control. It's amazing. They don't seem to regard the dollar as anything important. And if we lose our reserve currency status, it will mean that we have to borrow money every time we need to buy something. As it is now, all we do is just issue dollars because it's the reserve currency. And people say, okay, it's a dollar, we take it. But the time will come when they say, no, we're not going to take it any longer because it's not worth as much as you think it is. So we're going to be looking at a haircut on our currency, 30, 40%, and it can mean that prices of everything is going to go up, or prices will go up. And it's going to cause a great deal of pain in this country.
Well, this is a little heads up that it's not
Sure.
that far off.
Well, it's the price of profligacy. We have been profligate. We are like the son who wasted his money in riotous living. We have spent money on the craziest things. It makes no sense. There's been no plan. We just wasted. We said, well, after all we got to do is tax and get the money. Or we could issue some more bonds. Well, there comes a time that the foreigners say, we're not going to take your bonds anymore. It's going to happen, ladies and gentlemen, and when it does, it's going to cost a lot. In the meantime, protect your assets. Do not keep your money tied up in dollars, because the dollar is a sinking currency.
Welcome to Washington for this CBN News Break. President Obama's new diversity czar at the Federal Trade Commission says white executives should step down to make room for minorities. Mark Lloyd has come under fire from conservatives for comments made while he served at the Liberal Center for American Progress. The Washington Times reports Lloyd said, quote, unless we are conscious of the need to have more people of color, gays, other people in those positions, we will not change the problem. But we are in a position where you have to say who is going to step down so someone else can have power. Lloyd also said the decisions will be difficult because there are, quote, truly good people now holding these positions. America's military is struggling to find enough chaplains to minister to our troops. The Kansas Army National Guard is among the hardest hit, with 9 of its 15 chaplain posts still vacant. But leaders describe the high vacancy rate as typical of units across the country. Incentives like a sign-on bonus, tuition assistance, and extending the age limit for new enlistees have done little to reduce the shortage, and that has led to chaplains facing repeated deployments to war zones. Well, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbn.com